My stepmother broke the rules. She was the only one with her phone out at my wedding. What was supposed to be the most beautiful moment of my life was shattered by one disrespectful act from the only person who refused to follow the rules. There are days you dream of your whole life, days you build in your head piece by piece like a puzzle made of hopes, Pinterest boards, and whispered midnight conversations. My wedding day was that for me. I'd envisioned it in vivid detail for years. The soft flutter of ivory chiffon in the wind, the scent of fresh peonies and lavender, the sound of strings warming up in the distance, and the look on my future husband's face as I walked toward him. I wanted a ceremony wrapped in love, sealed with intimacy, and undisturbed by the outside world. From the moment I woke up that morning, everything felt like it had aligned. The sky was a gentle shade of blue, the kind that seems painted for fairy tales. The bridesmaids arrived early, all glowing with excitement, and we toasted with mimosas as the hair and makeup team got to work. I kept sneaking peeks at my reflection, watching myself transform into a version of me that felt both regal and raw. Underneath the foundation and false lashes, I was still that little girl who once wrapped bedsheets around her and pretended to marry a prince in the living room. And today, it was real. Our ceremony was to take place outdoors, surrounded by tall sycamores and gentle hills in the background. We had chosen this place precisely for its serenity, a secluded venue where time could slow down and the noise of the world could stay out. The chairs were set in two neat arcs framing a flower-strewn aisle. Our celebrant, a close family friend, stood at the front in soft linen, his presence calm and assuring. From early in the morning, he had made one thing absolutely clear: no phones during the ceremony. Let yourselves be fully present, he said, smiling warmly. Let the professionals capture the moments while you live them. He reminded the guests once when they arrived again before the bridal party came out, and once more right before the music began. I heard it all tucked away in the bridal suite, hidden from view, but fully attuned, and I was grateful. It meant the world to me to have that sacred walk down the aisle be just for us. No glowing screens, no distractions, no half-hearted claps through a camera lens. As the time neared, I felt a hush fall over the venue. My heart began to race, not out of nerves, but from an overwhelming sense of arrival. This was it. My father came to meet me, his eyes glossy with pride. He took my arm with a soft squeeze, and I smiled through the tears that threatened to spill. We waited for the first notes of the song, a gentle piano rendition of Can't Help Falling in Love. And then the doors opened. I stepped out. The air changed. For a moment, it felt like the whole world took a breath. The guests stood. Their heads turned in unison, a wave of motion like a field of sunflowers following the sun. I heard gasps, soft exclamations, the quiet awe of people witnessing a transformation. My fiancée, my love, stood at the altar, eyes wide, lips trembling clearly, fighting to keep it together. It was everything I had dreamed it would be, magnified by the weight of reality. But then, something pierced through the magic. A sharp glint, a cold eye. A phone. There it was. Third row. Aisle seat. Held up high like a trophy. It took a second to process that cold disruption in the sea of warmth. A phone camera recording. I could see the red dot flashing, and then I saw her face behind it. My stepmother, perfectly poised, her chin tilted slightly upward in that familiar aristocratic stance. Her manicured fingers wrapped around the rose gold iPhone like it belonged there, like she had every right. I felt something inside me deflate. This woman, always the polished perfectionist, always the one who lived by different rules than the rest of us, had decided that the one request I made, the one wish I had begged for, didn't apply to her. And just like that, the spell cracked. I muttered without thinking, my voice tight and low. She's got her fucking phone out. My dad stiffened beside me. He followed my gaze. His jaw tightened, his face turned red, and then he gestured sharply with a fury I had rarely seen in him. A wordless command. Put it away. She didn't flinch, didn't look ashamed, didn't even blink. If anything, she adjusted her grip on the phone like she was getting a better shot. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't stop walking. The music was playing. The guests were watching. My fiancée was waiting, so I did the only thing I could. I swallowed the rising tide of anger and sadness and disbelief, and I walked forward. I smiled. For the photos, for the family, for the day that was supposed to be perfect. But inside, a crack had formed. As I reached the altar, my fingers trembling just slightly in my father's arm, the applause began to fade. My fiancé, my soon-to-be husband, took me in like he hadn't seen me in years, like I was something holy. There was so much love in his eyes, I almost forgot what had just happened. Almost. But even as I smiled up at him, even as my father gently placed my hand into his, my mind kept flickering back like a glitch in a perfect recording to that phone. That glint of glass. That betrayal. My stepmother's seat, third row aisle, burned in the corner of my vision like a wound I couldn't ignore. My heart should have been full to the brim, overflowing with joy. But instead, there was a tiny pocket of disappointment wedged deep inside. And the worst part, I didn't want it to be there. I didn't want her to matter in that moment. But she did. She always did. She had always had that effect. The ability to take a space that wasn't hers and make it about her, subtly, elegantly, but unmistakably. She knew how to command attention without ever raising her voice. And on my wedding day, when every second was supposed to be about the love between me and the man standing before me, she stole 5 of them. Just 5. Maybe 10 at most. But they weren't just any seconds. They were the seconds. The moment I walked down the aisle. The moment my fiancé first saw me in my gown. The moment my father let go of me, and she held up her damn phone like she was the director of the whole thing. Our officiant welcomed everyone again and spoke gently about love growth and choosing each other daily. I heard him, I really did, but I wasn't fully there. Not the way I wanted to be. Because even as I stared into my husband's eyes, there was a part of me still seeing that camera lens pointed at my back. The ceremony went on. It was beautiful, truly. Our vows, handwritten and honest, made people laugh and cry. The birds seemed to sing on cue. The wind carried my veil just enough to make it feel cinematic. Everything on the surface was perfect. And yet, when we kissed, the moment every movie zooms in on, I felt like I had to force myself to only see him, to block out the nagging thought. Did she film that too? Was my first kiss as a wife just another clip for her camera roll? After we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife with cheers and flower petals in the air, I finally exhaled. My new husband squeezed my hand and whispered, You look like magic." I smiled for real this time, and for a few minutes the weight lifted. I allowed myself to feel the joy, the celebration, the sheer, overwhelming love that surrounded us. But then I noticed it. During family photos, when everyone gathered near the arch, my father took his seat beside my mom and stepfather. There was a gap, a clean, undeniable empty chair next to them. My stepmother's chair. She wasn't there. I scanned the guests subtly. No trace of her. Not in the cocktail area, not among the giggling cousins, not even lurking by the reception space where the planners were setting up. She had disappeared. Good, I thought bitterly. Maybe she realized how selfish she was being. Maybe she left out of shame. But that tiny spark of hope didn't last long. I overheard one of my coworkers, who had been seated directly behind her, talking to another guest. I couldn't believe it, she said, voice sharp with anger. She ignored every single request, held up her phone like she was the damn press. And then when the dad gestured at her, she rolled her eyes, like she didn't do anything wrong. I turned toward them and they noticed me. The coworker's expression softened. "Sorry," she said gently. "We're just talking about, well, I'm sure you know." I nodded. "Yeah, I saw." My husband approached then, oblivious. He hadn't seen any of it. His eyes were still glassy with happiness, his grin full of that post-wedding glow. "Everything okay?" he asked, slipping an arm around my waist. And I realized I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not now. So I smiled again, my go-to mask, and said, "Yeah, just processing everything." Later, during the speeches, I kept glancing at the empty seat. It stayed unclaimed the entire night. She never returned. Didn't come for the dinner. Didn't dance. Didn't even say goodbye. She left without a word. And what should have felt like relief, what should have been me reclaiming the day, felt like something far heavier. Like a shadow stretching across a painting. A petty part of me wanted to storm through the reception, waving her phone in the air and asking, was this really more important than showing respect? Was your need to document the moment greater than my need to live it? But I didn't. I stayed silent, poised, graceful, just like she always had. It wasn't until the car ride home, long after the lights dimmed and the sparklers faded, that I let myself cry. Just a little. My husband held my hand the whole way, still unaware, still floating in the magic. And I didn't tell him. Not yet. I just leaned my head against the window wedding veil in my lap, wondering why on the day I felt most loved, it was her disregard that stayed with me. The morning after the wedding was quiet. Too quiet. Our suite was wrapped in soft sunlight, champagne bottles half empty, my dress hanging over the back of a chair like a ghost of the night before. My husband was still asleep beside me, peaceful and utterly content. And I was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, heart full but tangled. Because even after all the joy and laughter and dancing that moment, her moment still clung to me like smoke. There were already a few messages waiting. Some were glowing congratulations, gushing about how perfect the ceremony had been. But a few were different, sharper, more pointed. You handled that with class. I saw what your stepmother did. Unbelievable. I'm still so angry on your behalf. It hadn't just been my coworkers who saw it. Apparently several guests had noticed. Some even took quiet photos of her with her phone held up like a reporter on assignment, completely ignoring the officiant's repeated requests. I scrolled in silence, unsure of what emotion to feel first. Vindication, maybe. I wasn't crazy. People had noticed. It wasn't just me being overly sensitive on my wedding day, but mostly I felt tired. Because no matter how many people supported me or how many voiced their frustration, none of them could rewind those few seconds. None of them could restore the moment she took. And worst of all, none of them could explain why she did it. She hadn't texted me. Not a single message. No apology, no acknowledgement, just radio silence. I showered in a daze and dressed slowly. When my husband woke up, he pulled me into a hug and kissed my forehead, murmuring, "You were incredible yesterday." I smiled, and for a few moments it felt real. Whole. Untouched. Till he added, "Even your stepmom looked like she was crying when you walked in." I pulled back a little. "You saw her?" He nodded, clueless. "Just for a second. I think she was in the third row. I didn't really notice much after you appeared. I couldn't take my eyes off you." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. There it was again, that quiet frustration bubbling like a pot I couldn't take off the heat. The way she had the audacity to film the moment, then disappear and still somehow exist in people's minds as someone who had felt the moment deeply, who had wept, who had cared. But she hadn't cared enough to respect the one request I made, the only rule we asked of our guests during the ceremony. No phones. Be present. Let the professionals do the capturing. Just be there with us. She couldn't even give us that. At brunch later that day, the whispers started. We were surrounded by people who loved us, family friends, old college roommates, co-workers who'd flown in just for this. But underneath all the hugs and compliments, there was a quiet ripple of gossip. She walked out before the dinner even started. She was furious when your dad gestured at her. Did you see the look she gave him? I think she felt embarrassed, but she still didn't say a word. The thing about weddings is they aren't just a celebration, they're a mirror. Every guest sees themselves in it, how they show up, how they behave, how they choose to support or make things about them. And my stepmother, she couldn't let the mirror reflect anything but herself. By the time dessert was served, I felt like I was carrying a stone in my chest. Everyone meant well. They wanted me to feel supported. But every new comment about her just dragged me further from the magic of the day before and deeper into the weight of that disappointment. "She's just jealous," someone whispered. You were glowing and she couldn't stand not being the center of attention. Maybe. Maybe that was it. Or maybe she just didn't think the rules applied to her. Maybe she genuinely believed she was doing something kind, capturing a moment from her perspective. Maybe she didn't see it as stealing anything, only adding to it. But intention doesn't erase impact. And the impact was that I had been pulled out of the most sacred moment of my life. Even if it was just for 5 seconds. Even if I had managed to recover quickly. Even if on the surface the ceremony was flawless. I still remembered. I remembered the anger that twisted in my stomach as my father clenched his jaw beside me and motioned for her to put the phone down. I remembered how she didn't. I remembered feeling robbed just for a breath of the pure joy I had waited my entire life to feel. And it stayed with me. That night when the celebration was over and we were back in our room, I sat on the bed and stared at the ceiling. "Do you think I'm overreacting?" I asked softly. My husband looked up from the little card he was reading, the one a flower girl had made for us. About what, I hesitated. Then I told him. All of it. From the moment I saw her phone to the whispers to the empty chair. My feelings. The guilt I felt for even being angry. The shame for letting it matter so much. He listened quietly, thoughtfully. And when I was done, he didn't try to fix it. He didn't tell me to let it go. He just reached out, took my hand and said, "You deserve to feel like the world stopped for you in that moment. And anyone who took that away even for a second was in the wrong." I broke down then. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I finally felt seen. He didn't dismiss me. He didn't downplay it. He got it. And in that moment I realized something. I couldn't control what my stepmother had done, but I could choose who I let occupy my heart from that day forward. And she wouldn't get to live rent-free in mine anymore. The honeymoon glow hadn't even begun before the itch set in. I couldn't stop thinking about her. About it. It wasn't obsession exactly. It was more like a splinter. Tiny, sharp, and buried just deep enough that it didn't cause pain constantly, but when it did, it was precise. Sudden. Cutting. I would be doing something completely normal, washing my face, answering emails, folding the dress I wore to brunch. And suddenly, there she was in my mind again. Sitting in the third row, smug and composed, phone raised like a royal scepter. Smiling. Disconnected. I had a choice to make: confront her, or let it die in silence. For days I wavered. Part of me didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. That her ignorance, her entitlement, her refusal to play by the rules had taken something from me. She would love that I imagined. She would spin herself as the victim again. She always found a way to twist things, to act like I was dramatic or too sensitive or incapable of being gracious about misunderstandings. But the other part of me burned. Burned with the need to say something, not to fight, not even to win, just to say it, to speak my truth, without minimizing it or tucking it under a forced smile. It wasn't about the phone. It was about what it represented. She didn't respect me. She never had. This wasn't her first act of subtle sabotage. There had been dozens of moments over the years, moments I had tucked into drawers and closed quietly for the sake of peace. Backhanded compliments, judgments wrapped in silk, comments to my dad, when she thought I couldn't hear about how I was so emotional or liked to make things about me. I didn't forget. I just chose to rise above it. Again and again. But this time, it was different. Because she didn't just hurt me. She disrupted us. She disrespected our ceremony. She didn't just break my heart. She stepped on a moment that belonged to my husband and me, that we had carefully planned and dreamed about for months. She had taken a sacred once-in-a-lifetime moment and made it about herself. And she didn't apologize, didn't explain, didn't say a word. So I picked up my phone and wrote a message. It took me 2 hours to finish. I wrote and deleted, rewrote and softened, then rewrote and sharpened, then softened again. What I finally landed on was this: "Hi, stepmother's name. I hope you're well. I wanted to say thank you for attending our wedding. It meant a lot to both of us to have everyone there to witness something so meaningful. That said, I feel I need to be honest about something that's been weighing on me." We had asked multiple times for phones to be put away during the ceremony. It was something that mattered deeply to us, not just for photos, but to keep the moment sacred and focused. When I walked down the aisle and saw you filming, it really hurt me. You may not have realized the impact in the moment, but it took me out of something that was deeply emotional and personal. It's been hard to let go of. I'm not trying to create conflict. I just needed to say this because keeping it inside has been hurting me more. I hope you can understand where I'm coming from. My name. I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit send and waited. 2 days went by. Nothing. I tried not to look at my phone. Tried not to read into the silence. Maybe she was shocked. Maybe she was offended. Maybe she was composing a thoughtful reply. Or maybe, like so many times before, she just didn't care enough to respond. But then on the third morning, there it was. A single gray bubble on my screen. "I'm sorry you felt that way. I didn't realize it would be such a big deal. I only took a few seconds of video because I was proud of you and wanted to remember the moment. I didn't mean to upset you. That was it. No, I'm sorry I did it. I'm sorry you felt that way." The classic non-apology. I read it twice, then once more. She had taken a moment from me, refused to acknowledge the wrong in her actions, and now had the nerve to suggest my feelings were the problem. I set my phone down and walked away. I didn't reply. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just let the silence stretch. Because this wasn't about changing her anymore. I knew she'd never truly see me the way I wanted, never truly respect me, never see beyond her own reflection. But I saw myself. I saw a bride who had the courage to speak up, even if it made things uncomfortable. A woman who didn't let herself be gaslit into silence. A person who honored her own boundaries, even when others trampled over them. She may have stolen 5 seconds from my wedding, but I wasn't going to let her steal any more from my healing. The days following her message were strangely quiet. Not just on the outside, no calls, no follow-ups, but in my own heart too. The anger that had once burned so hot now felt like warm ash. I wasn't sure if that was peace or just exhaustion. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something else, acceptance maybe. I had always thought that when people hurt you, especially family, you had to confront it until you reached closure. I'd waited for it from her for years. Waited for kindness, accountability, decency. But sometimes closure doesn't come in the way you hope. Sometimes it looks like letting go of an apology you'll never get and walking forward anyway. I told my husband everything. We were sitting in our new apartment, wedding photos spread out on the living room rug. I hadn't wanted to poison the early days of our marriage with drama, but he was my partner now. I owed him the truth. He listened without interrupting. He took my hand when I paused, eyes wet with the weight of it all. And when I finished, he said something I'll never forget. You didn't deserve that, and you did the right thing by standing up for yourself. But now maybe it's time we build new moments, ones no one can touch. It wasn't a magic cure, but it was a beginning. We framed a photo of us at the altar laughing as the wind blew my veil across his face. You couldn't see the crowd or the third row or her. Just us two people in love in a bubble of joy untouched by anything or anyone else. That photo sits on our nightstand now. And I've started to think of healing as a kind of selective vision. Not blindness, never denial, but the conscious choice to focus on what builds you instead of what breaks you. I still see her sometimes. Family events, birthdays, awkward reunions. She always smiles a little too wide, talks a little too loud, acts as if nothing happened. And I let her. Because I've made my peace, even if she never will. My dad noticed the shift. One day he pulled me aside and said, "You seem stronger, happier." I smiled. I am. He didn't ask for details and I didn't give them. He didn't need to know that part of my strength came from learning that silence can be a boundary too. But even as I move on, I don't forget. I remember the lessons that self-respect sometimes comes at the cost of comfort. That not all family deserves your trust just because they share your blood. That your voice is worth using even when it shakes. And most importantly, that one ruined moment doesn't ruin the whole story unless you let it. Our wedding day was beautiful. Flawed, yes, but filled with laughter and tears and the kind of love you can't fake for a camera. The kind that's messy and real and raw. And in the end, that's what I'll carry with me. Not the phone, not the interruption, but the way my husband looked at me when I reached him at the altar like I was the only person in the world. Because in that moment we were infinite, and no one, not even her, could ever take that away.